Welcome to Breaking Financial Chains, where we combine practical money guidance with emotional healing to help you break free from financial limitations. I'm Tanya Riverson, your financial wingwoman.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Breaking Financial Chains. I'm so happy that you're here. Today, in this episode, we're going to be talking about understanding your money story and how childhood shapes our financial habits. So it's the sort of the lines that we tell ourselves, the underlying scripts that affect so much more than our money. But obviously this podcast is about money, so we're going to focus on that for now. But it would be really interesting to hear your take on what comes up for you in listening to this episode. So I would absolutely love any and all of your feedback. So the themes for this episode are along the lines of emotional awareness, pattern recognition, and ultimately permission to change. Sometimes we just need to be given that opportunity, and if this is your permission slip, then you're very welcome. So we aren't born with beliefs about money, right? We all, on an inherent logical level, we can all accept that that is absolutely the truth, in the same as we are born with any ideas or ideals around anything. All of these things that we carry with us have been absorbed at some point or another. Sometimes they're absorbed by specific experiences and individual happenings, but most of the time they're handed to us. Those ideas and stories and beliefs around money, those habits, they're not random. They're stories that have been handed, usually when we're very, very young, sort of pre-7 years of age. Because those are the times when our brain is doing its biggest work in terms of wiring the beliefs without question. Because our brains at that point are very immature, they're like sponges. So they soak up anything and everything, and they're also very immature. Thinking around 7 years of age, we can't distinguish between fact and an opinion, or how somebody makes us feel. So that is hardwired into the way that we think around money specifically, and we then carry that with us. But it's often why we have no idea where those ideas come from, because we don't question them. They're just part of the furniture as we're going through life merrily. So what is a money story? A money story is a personal narrative about what money means to you, and it is very individual. No two people are going to have the exact same money story, because no two people have walked the exact same path with the exact same emotional makeup and experience things in the exact same way. So it's the reason you can have two siblings experience their parents separating and divorcing, but come out of that experience with very different beliefs and have very different outward behaviours as a result of that experience that they've had. So it's shaped by what we've seen, what we've heard, and really importantly and often overlooked, it's shaped by what we felt. It's shaped by the experience that we had around how the energy changed in the room when talk turned to money. Or it's shaped by how we felt when we perhaps asked a question about money, very dependent upon the response that we got. I've talked about this before on this podcast, and I asked my dad how much he earned, and I was threatened with a thick ear. And it was a very flippant response. It wasn't a very calculated, I was actually going to get one. It was very much a mind your own business and shut up and get on with what you're supposed to be doing. I don't know how old I would have been, maybe 9 or 10 years of age, I can't remember. But that was a very important shaping lesson around, if I ask questions about money, I am threatened with violence. And then similarly, as I got older and asked somebody what they earned in my first job when I turned 18, I was told it was a sackable offence to discuss salary. So there we go again. If I ask questions about money, I get threatened with my P45. So it's things like that that become part of the belief. I can't talk about money because it isn't safe. And that was very much an underlying thread of my script that then directs subconscious, unconscious parts of our brain. So whilst we talk about the fact that there's very little by way of financial education in schools. It doesn't actually matter what you've been explicitly taught, because so much of what we carry within our stories is based on saw, heard, felt. What we can do though is layer that with education, not just around this is how you can manage your bank account, but this is how our brains are wired, and therefore this impacts how we manage our money as grown-ups running a business, running a family and a household. And as I've mentioned as well earlier on, it's often unconscious, and yet it drives most of our financial behaviours. So we're not aware of it, we don't understand necessarily in the moment why we're triggered by certain things happening, but it is very much present and running the show if we allow it. We get to make a change though, which I'm going to come on to. Common childhood messages that really stick, quite apart from, ask me that question again and I'm going to give you a thick ear, we can't afford that. So that then becomes the running, we can't afford that, we can't afford that, can't have that, can't afford a holiday, can't afford new shoes, can't afford designer clothes, can't afford that thing that all of your friends have got. You have to work hard for money. You know, you have to earn it. You get what you get back, what effort that you put in. It's very much about exchanging time for money, and this can be a very common recurring theme for people in business. Rich people are greedy. We can potentially thank Disney for that, but again, it's a learnt thing that our parents, grandparents, people that surrounded us in our early years get to teach us because of their experience with people with money. Don't talk about money because it's rude. There we go. P45, thick ear, another example. Money is men's business. Ladies don't talk about money. Oh my God, such a powerful thing to be told at a young age. And yet very much something that is somebody else's belief that we get to pick up, we inherit, we then potentially run with. We feel it's not a lady's place to ask about money. It's not our place to try and manage, heaven forbid, or try and get involved in managing the finances. I think in this day and age that's starting to change, but because of all of the emotional baggage potentially that can come with in and around money, it's taking far too long, and that's part of the reason why this podcast exists. These messages show up in adulthood in many different ways. I've already mentioned some. I've shared some of my story as well in earlier episodes of the podcast. If you haven't listened to the story about my bouncy ball, then please do go and listen to that, because I go into that in a lot of detail. But it was a turning point for me in understanding how one experience can have such a powerful and lasting effect. So talking about my experience with the bouncy ball was very much highlighted for me that a seemingly insignificant incident on a very normal day had such a long-lasting effect and impact on how I then went on to deal with money, manage money, think about money. So in terms of how these can affect us as we move into adult life, this can manifest as overspending potentially to prove that you're not struggling. I see this a lot with clients, with people that post a lot on social media as an example, and it serves in its own very downward spiral in that sort of behaviour, because when we observe somebody doing that, we think that that's something that perhaps we should do, and it makes us believe we're the only one that's struggling with money. Look at how everybody else is behaving, look at what they're spending, look at that new car, that holiday, that new bag. But there's no detail of how that car is paid for, what credit card that handbag has been put on, or whether it's been paid for at all. You know, it might be gifted, it might be borrowed. We make assumptions, again, based on our own money stories, based on our own money beliefs, and we then use that, because we're human, it's an inherent condition, we use that to beat ourselves over the head with, because we believe we should be further along or in a different position to where we actually are. And it can be so damaging. I think there's a lot that can be said for slowing right down and staying in your own lane, which is a lot of messages that we're going to get across in these podcast episodes, and exactly how you can do that, sort of turning inward and looking at what you want and what you want to achieve and how you want to achieve it. So important. It can show up as under earning from a fear of judgment. If I go for that promotion and I get that extra pay rise and then people start asking me how much money I'm earning, am I going to feel an inherent feeling of guilt around earning more than what my family had? Guilt around having more money than family, more money than your parents, earning more than the people around you, and feeling guilty for the fact that there are people close to you that maybe don't have as much and can't afford as much or can't live as well as you can live. Avoiding budgeting because it triggers anxiety or shame. So rather than actually dealing with what we have, we're avoiding it entirely and walking blindly into the wilderness when it comes to managing our money, which can be so massively dangerous. There was an example of a coaching client that I work with, and this is shared with permission. I've mentioned this again a few times on social media and in earlier episodes. That was one of their goals in managing their money, was to be able to earn enough to not need to budget. Coming from a place of, if I have enough, I don't need to manage what I have. I don't need to be intentional with what I have. And that turned into a very interesting conversation around, just because we have money doesn't mean that we get to forego the budgeting process. Elon Musk still budgets, because with that intentional money behaviour comes an inherent understanding of what it takes to earn that money, and how much things cost, and therefore how we can plan. Just because we have enough doesn't mean that it's okay to waste it. If we have enough, we can do more, we can give more, we can invest and save more, we can provide more for future us, for our families and for their families ahead of them. So these stories often spiral and they get out of control, and before we realise, they can become something else and become something bigger, when what we actually need is an awareness of what those stories are, where they come from, and then we get to change them. Sometimes this isn't necessarily around having less money than we perhaps feel we deserve, or having less money than we need or want. This can be around having too much money, which is an interesting concept from the point of view of feeling unsafe if our bank accounts are fuller than necessary, and not knowing what to do with it, not knowing how to hang on to it or how to use it as a tool. Ultimately, that's what money is. It's a tool. It gives us choices. It gives us the ability to say no. But if our beliefs aren't aligned to that and aren't understanding of the logical, factual purpose of what money is as a commodity, then we can go down a different avenue. Now, this isn't about blame, as I've said already. This is about awareness. This isn't about parent bashing. Of our parents, our caregivers, our grandparents, whoever we spent a lot of time with and whoever we learnt those lessons from, did the best with what they had at the time. They did the best with what they could give, and that's completely fine. That's totally okay. But you get to decide what's serving you. It's not disrespectful to choose differently. We've learned from the lessons that we're given, and we get to choose what's still serving us and also what's not. We get to leave behind, and literally, if we're carrying that weight like a backpack, we get to take it off our shoulders and put it down with love, with the best intention, and move forward, choosing something differently. It is literally a case of choosing a different path, getting to the crossroads and turning left instead of going straight ahead. You inherited their survival tools. They did the best with what they had, how they could. You get to choose differently. You get to build something new with the knowledge and education that you build up over the years. Now, as I like to do in as many of these episodes as I possibly can, I like to give you some journaling and reflection prompts, if you feel so called, because it's one thing to sit and listen and hear podcast episodes like this, but the magic happens when we actually do something about it, when we take action. Journaling is one of my absolute favourite ways to work through my own past experiences, my own trauma. I find it a very, very useful, very efficient, very inexpensive tool. I talk to my clients about it. I talk to my children about it. It's super effective. So I'm going to give you some journaling prompts. Please feel free to work through as many as you feel called to. Disregard the rest. So the first prompt is, what's my first memory of money? Thinking about who was there, where were you, how did it make you feel, remembering as factually as you can, although, you know, if it's your first memory around money, you're likely very, very young. It is your version of that experience, which is the important part. Write as much of that detail down as you can. Let your brain take you where it needs to go and trust that that's just going to come out on the paper. What messages about money did I absorb as a child? So that can be related to that first memory, that can be related to other things. Quite often when we start to write, as that process works, we can move in all different directions. Don't try to step in the way. Don't try to stop or censor what you're writing down. In a safe way, let your pen take you where you want to go, or use a digital journal if that's something that you prefer, if you prefer to type. You can keep that somewhere safe, use as a password protected file if that makes you feel more comfortable. How do those beliefs show up in my life today? A little bit trickier, but relax into it. You know, get yourself a cup of tea, cup of coffee, your libation of choice, and sit and consider where you think that affects you. Whether that's your spending habits, your saving habits, your lack of saving habits, what you spend money on, where you feel the same feelings compared to your earlier memories to now, and your experiences around money now. And the final prompt, what story do I want to live by instead? So taking those early stories, those early memories and those beliefs, how do you want to change it? How could you write the reverse if it's a negative memory? How could you choose something that you could positively work to, building yourself up a little mantra if you like, going from today forward? And if it's something that you really want to dig into and set up as like a little mini project, you can start rewriting your story, start rewriting that script by naming the belief. You know, what is it that you believe? Historical you, young you, what is it that you believe around money? Explore where that came from, again in as much detail as you possibly can. Question the truth of that belief, and this is sometimes where other feelings can come up. If we have a feeling of guilt or disloyalty, dependent upon where that belief comes from, it's okay to think differently. It's okay to upgrade your belief system now. This is not about throwing shade on anybody at all. This is about evolution for yourself. If your current money story is not serving you and not helping you to get where you want to be today, then that's something that we can look at, and it's something that we can safely reshape. Once we question the truth, if it's something that we actually don't believe to be true anymore, choose a new one. Choose a new one. Rewrite what you want that belief to be, and then create a small habit to start with. So let's say we have a belief that money flows through my fingers like water, and no matter how you try to think differently or try to logically outsmart that behaviour in yourself, the same thing happens all the time, which then just becomes a positive loop around confirmation of that actual belief. So we get an unexpected windfall, but then the boiler needs servicing and there's a bit of repair work, and therefore all that money is all of a sudden gone. or the car needs a service and it's failed its MOT and we need to buy new tyres, and all of a sudden all that money is gone. All of that bonus money that you thought you might be able to put into extra savings or maybe a family holiday next year has disappeared, because money flows through my fingers like water. Question yourself, where did that belief come from? Almost think back as early as you can in a safe way to think about, when do I remember first feeling that, first saying that, first thinking that, and what was happening at that time? And you can sort of reflect back on all of the times where that's just become a self-fulfilling prophecy over the years. Is it actually true? Does money really flow through your fingers like water? Choose a new belief. I can hold on to money. I can hold on to money, and repeat that over and over. And a small habit then might be to put a jar somewhere prominently that you can see, on a windowsill, in the office, in the kitchen, somewhere that you're going to regularly see in your day-to-day life. And every time you catch yourself thinking, oh, for God's sake, money flows through my fingers like water, put a coin in the jar. Any coin. It doesn't need to be a pound coin. It doesn't need to be something that's going to break the bank. It can be a penny. It can be a 2p piece that you save. I have a small old chocolate tin, which is a telephone box, to be repurposed as a money tin. You could take a penny out of that tin and put it in the jar that you can see every day, to start to rewire that belief around, I can hold on to money. Because not only are we going to say it, our brain is going to hear it, our brain is going to think it and absorb that thought, but it's also going to be reminded on a daily, constantly daily basis that I can hold on to money. Look, because the jar is there. The jar has got money in it, therefore I can choose to believe something differently, and I can start to tell myself another story. And in telling myself that, it's going to start feeling safer, because that then will become the self-fulfilling prophecy. And we then might then think, do you know what, I'm going to take a look at my bank statements, and I'm going to look at how much money I'm spending on things that I might not 100% need. How much am I spending on takeaways? How much am I spending on buying stuff that the kids need, or paying for lunches because I'm not organised, or we've not got lunches made at home, or whatever it might be that comes up for you that you think, do you know what, I think we could probably save a little bit of money there, and it starts to snowball. That effect starts to snowball, and then that belief becomes more of the positive actions that we take on a daily basis. And that is just one example that I've just come up with while we've been chatting about this here, that this is something that you could do for yourself. Name the belief, explore where it came from, question the truth, choose a new one. It can be that simple if you allow it to be. So up until now, your story has been completely valid. It's got you to where you are today, but it is editable. It is something that you get to change and rewrite. You are not broken. You were just patterned. So when you're ready, with awareness, we get to treat today as a fresh page. We get to start something new and different, and you get to write that next chapter in your money story. But this starts with awareness, and then we go from there. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to see you on the next episode.
Thank you for joining me today on Breaking Financial Chains. Remember, you have the power to transform your relationship with money one step at a time. If this episode helped you, please subscribe and leave a review to help others find their path to financial freedom. I'm Tanya, your financial wing woman, and I'll see you next week.